You're listening to a CNA podcast.
Last month, people at a busy junction in Singapore heard a loud crack. In an instant, a 20-meter tree came crashing down onto a road, trapping passengers and several vehicles. Well, no one was hurt. But over the years, collapsed trees have damaged roads, walkways, and even killed people in Singapore. For most of us, trees are just part of the urban canopy. But tragic incidents also show they have great power to cause great harm. In the studio with me today is Peter Sasi. He's the Vice President of Asia Pacific at Greehill. The company is based in Singapore and utilizes artificial intelligence to monitor the health of trees. Well, on this episode of the Climate Conversations, he tells me how extreme weather is threatening more and more trees and raising the risk for people in urban areas. Peter, thank you so much for joining us in the Climate Conversations.
Thanks for inviting me.
Your journey into tree management is quite intriguing. You've had a long career in tech, particularly in fintech and data. How did you make the leap into this new tech-driven approach to tree management?
Okay, so tech is in my life. Since primary school, I was competitive programming. Then I became an engineer, and then I became a consultant, and I started business development abroad. But I was always doing tech, and in that I was always doing digitalization. And this opportunity came along, and in a way, this is still digitalization of the cities. The purpose, the goal is to help trees, help climate adaptation, help the citizens of the cities have a more livable time in the climate change. And I jumped on this opportunity for several reasons. I'm really interested in the AI and machine learning angles. I get to learn about arboriculture, how trees behave, how they live, what they like, what they don't like. And finally, I'm working for something that is actually helping my kids' future life to be better.
Okay. I mean, we all know Singapore is a green city with more trees than people, but managing them isn't as straightforward as it seems. What are the challenges in keeping this sort of lush urban forest thriving?
Basically, this is a resource-intensive thing to do. Urban maintenance usually is, but unlike the technological features like benches or bus stops, trees are so various that all different species, they grow in different places, they behave differently. So it needs quite a lot of workforce, both on the expert level and the underground teams who actually make the changes necessary. Basically, you have to send out people who will look through the inventory and then assess the condition of the tree and decide if it needs a treatment, and if it needs, what treatment does it need, or if it needs an even more in-depth inspection.
Yeah, trees or these urban forests clean our air, they shade our pavements, but can be potentially dangerous. With incidents like falling trees, it's clear we can't always predict when a tree might become at risk. So how does your technology help monitor and manage trees to prevent such incidents?
So basically, if you think of these people, the tree inspectors or the arborists as the tree doctors, then we are kind of the MRI machine who is able to look through the entire city all at once, and we are able to spot the possible problems and diseases that the doctors need to focus on. So basically, what we are trying to do here is that instead of having to visit every single tree every once in a while, we rush around with a car with practically the speed of traffic, and we capture the entire city, and there is a machine learning. And when I say machine learning, it's usually typical like several machine learning pipelines working together to identify the trees and analyze the trees and come up with certain red flags, like this tree has a too high leaning angle, it might fall, or this tree has dead branches which may drop and kill people or really damage cars, infrastructures. So basically that's what we are trying to highlight. And then the tree doctors first can focus on the trees that actually need help. So that's why we say we give trees a voice.
Oh, I see. So it's more like Google Map cars that we see on the roads from time to time?
Yep, it's similar to that. The big difference being that Google Map takes photos. We also take panoramic photos because the arborist needs to see the trees, but we also do a 3D mapping. So you usually see this, from drones where they use these laser scanners and they do a 3D model.
Right.
Why we do it from the ground is several different reasons that we need a high resolution and high accuracy. Even a 5 centimeter error is huge if you want to find out the age estimation of a tree. The other is that we have to see the tree from the ground up to be able to simulate its structure. We can actually calculate or simulate what is going to be the wind speed that will break this tree. The other important goal is to figure out the ecological services of the tree. And most of them actually depend on the leaf area. So the very leafy trees are usually excelling at this, and the less leafy trees, like palm trees, they grow really fast, but they have a single layer of leaves. And the shading is given to us to get a cooler place by the leaves. They also transpire and evaporate water, bringing down the temperature. That's also done with the leaves. Then they also convert carbon monoxide to oxygen. That's also done with the chlorophyll in the leaves. They also capture the very concerning PSI, the PM 2.5 fine floating dust particles from the air. That's also done with the leaf. So basically, leaf area is a very, very important measure. They usually estimate it with big tables like this species, this age, this size is usually this leaf area. We can measure it.
Okay. So what are the distinction between the urban trees and their wild counterparts? And are they subjected to more stress, would you say?
Definitely, yeah. So trees reacting to their environment. In Singapore, there is no winter, so there are no age rings in the trees.
Right.
So you can't count them. And they grow also a lot faster. But it's also about the soil. So since here we have a very fertile soil, they don't have to grow so deep roots. They get all the nutrition and water in a shallow root system. So many differences, even with the very same species in different climates, different conditions. And that's also true about the street side tree. And actually, if you go around other capitals in this region, which I do very often, now that I know some things about arboriculture, I recognize that the same species on the street side, they are really suffering in other places because they are constrained in where they can grow. They are between two concrete slabs, basically. So it does affect a lot. And as we build more concrete stuff, it puts a pressure on them and reduces the place to live for them.
Hello, my name is Steve Lai.
And I'm Teresa Tang, and we are the hosts of CNA Correspondent,
A podcast that takes you to the heart of the work our correspondents do across the globe.
from China's COVID response to the childcare center massacre in Thailand.
And from the fall of Najib Razak to the rise of Anwar Ibrahim as Malaysia's Prime Minister.
We speak to the people at the reporting front lines.
So if you want to know how the biggest global stories unfold, make sure you follow or subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts.
Speaking of pressure and stress, lately we've been getting some wild storms and long hot spells, which experts say are linked to climate change. Actually, a couple of years ago, I had this massive palm tree leaf fall on my head during one of those crazy storms. Lucky me, I was lugging an umbrella, which had really helped cushion that blow a bit, but still, it left quite an impression. So, Peter, tell us how these wild weather conditions impact the stability of trees, and what's the deal with climate change and tree management?
We know that change is coming, and part of the thing is that the lack of information. As you said, the whole thing is about big data management and trying to analyze and get the information out of and share it. And the scientists who try to come up with the new calculations, the new ideas what to do, they don't have a sample size really big. So they have the ability to maybe hand measure 300 or 500 trees and draw their conclusions from it. So that's a very small sample size. And when we do the scanning, we really capture much more detailed data and much more precise data about tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of trees. So I think one important point is sharing the information and basing our knowledge going forward on much more detailed information. And that's what we strive to do.
Yeah.
The second thing is that because of this, we don't really have a very good visibility as what's actually coming. So we just have to prepare for everything. And what we already do is this is coming from the partnership with the APAC, is there is a tree structure modeling. So you can imagine it like Minecraft. We rebuild the tree from small boxes and then we blow it with a virtual wind. And since we also recognize the species of the tree, we know how hard the wood is. We know how big the canopy is, which is capturing the wind, like a sail. So we can calculate what is going to be the wind speed to break this tree. And when you are preparing for, 80 kilometers per hour winds or 100 kilometers per hour winds, we can already highlight these are the trees that will break at this wind speed. Then you can go and preventively prune the tree. Of course, it sounds bad that you are cutting off some of the branches, but you are actually saving the tree's life because it is not going to break and it is not going to fall on other people. So it's actually a win-win.
Okay. I mean, the good news is that the cases of fallen trees have plummeted by around 85% over the last 20 years, according to NParks. But it still leaves an average of around 400 cases reported each year in Singapore. Can technology eventually eliminate falling trees entirely, or will it always be about reducing the numbers?
So there are different falling trees. So if there is a root rot and it's not very stable on the ground, it may uproot much earlier. If there is an internal decay because it has a Y shape and stuff is getting caught in the middle and making a decay inside the tree, it may be lower. So that's why we still have the arborists and they still need to do the inspections. The good news is that what we usually say that we do the legwork for the arborists. We actually go there, we actually take all the measurements, we do all the data entry. So their usual work of like 12 to 15 minutes per tree of doing the estimations, recording the data, it's all can be optimized away and they are left with the brain work. So we do the legwork, they do the brain work of actually assessing the condition and finding out about all the conditions which are not so easy to automate away. And since this leaves a lot more time for them, they can cover more trees in a shorter time and basically de-risk the trees.
Oh, would you say there's more demand and interest in tree management?
Absolutely. So in 2021, we had a single customer, the National Parks Board of Singapore. In 22, we had a couple of European cities and a few US towns where we did scans and we started helping. And now we are partnering up with a lot of greenery management organizations. So we have close to hundreds of cities in both Europe and US and also reaching out to several countries in Asia Pacific. So now with Australia and New Zealand, we can say that we are all over 4 continents already. And having started 2 years ago, that's quite a steep growth. Some people still say this is not possible, but we make people aware that now you can use AI for the good of the climate adaptation and the people living in the urban environment. Second thing, there is still some negative reaction from traditional people. So the thing that the people come to me with is AI is going to take our jobs. No, it's not, but quite possibly people who can use AI as a tool, they might take your job. So instead of being afraid of AI, we have to embrace and learn how to use it. So that's the primary message, and that's what we do.
Interesting. So Peter, before we wrap up, I hope you can give us a tip or two in detecting signs of a tree in poor health or on the verge of falling. Because people who have witnessed trees collapsing, they say it can happen quite suddenly.
So that's really hard, and Parks position, and I can understand why it's really hard to do a condition assessment without specific knowledge of these species. One easy thing to see is dead branches, so which goes for your palm leaf as well as normal leafy trees. That if you see a tree that has leaves in the other areas but not in certain areas, that's kind of a telltale sign. If you see a tree with a high leaning angle, that can be dangerous. Very often now in Singapore, and that's another project NParks is working with a different vendor, is there are these small boxes and they put it on the tree and then there is a sensor. If the lean is increasing, then they quickly rush over there and try to do something about it. So that's another telltale sign. Okay,
if we hear a crack, what should we do? Do we duck, dive, run?
I would say to get away. As I'm very often running in the Bukit Timah Hill, I did have an occasion where it just crashed before us. So that happens. You have to be aware. So I would think that other than enjoying the nature, you should also not plug up your ears totally with music.
Good point.
Because then you are aware of your surroundings and you can actually react to it. And also not be dreaming all about, because then you can see the snakes.
Yes. Okay. So I guess it's best to stay alert and aware, especially when we are in the proximity of these green giants. Thank you so much for your valuable insight, Peter. It was interesting to find out more about how these trees can be better managed through the use of technology and what we can do to coexist safely with these towering natural wonders. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Well, thanks to my guest and thanks to everyone for tuning in. I hope you enjoy this episode. And do remember to like and subscribe to this podcast so you know when the new episode drops. Leave us a message on Spotify or Apple Podcasts to let us know what you think. The team behind this podcast is Cyan Win, Jacqueline Chen, Joanne Chen, Tiffany Ang, Crispina Robert, and I'm Julie Yoo signing off.